This is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time. Um, and before I do the video, I need to put some caveats out there. This will undoubtedly be painted as a racist video, that I'm a racist. Uh, the word really doesn't have any meaning anymore. Everybody is a racist, especially if you're white. If you're white, you're a default racist now, according to some people. So, I have lived most of my life in Mobile, Alabama, which is roughly 50% black, 50% white. Yeah, I mean, there's some other groups there, but that's it. It's a mixed city. I have been around blacks all that time. Vast majority of them I have no problem with. To this day, I think that the majority of black people are just as moral, as intelligent, whatever you want to say, as any other race. However, we do have a problem in this nation, the United States of America, in the year 2026, with what I call ghetto blacks, as opposed to normal blacks. And I'm not going to, say what the population percentages are, but normal blacks make up most of them, of the black population. The ghetto blacks, though, are the ones that are inherently violent, unable to exist in our society in a civil manner, and they cost us an awful lot, not just in terms of the lost lives, because you got blacks are 13% of the population, males or black males, therefore, around 6 or 7%, and then of that 6 or 7%, you got 1 or 2% who are the ones who are responsible for nearly half the homicides in the United States. Why is this? Why is there a certain subset of blacks that just either cannot or will not acclimatize themselves to a civil society like the one we have? And I've always been a big study of paleoanthropology ever since I started reading Clan of the Cave Bear. Awesome book. Sequels, after the first sequel, you don't need to go any farther, trust me, unless you just like the world building. But the first book especially had a very profound effect on me. And at the time, one of the storylines is that the heroine conceives a child from a Neanderthal, and she's a Homo sapiens, he's a Neanderthal, and has a mixed child. Scientists at the time called this a bunch of hooey, and it couldn't happen. Homo sapiens and Neanderthals weren't compatible with each other. And wow, they all have egg on their face now. I know for a fact that I have 2.5% Neanderthal DNA in me. Somewhere down a long, long time ago, there was a Neanderthal who would become one of my ancestors. So, but I grew up not only in a very limited, compared to today, understanding of human genetic history. I grew up believing that all Homo sapiens alive today were the same. And so therefore, So therefore, racism was stupid because we all were Homo sapiens. And any disruptive characteristics assigned to one demographic, in this case blacks, had to be cultural. It could not be genetic. And to further prove that, I would see black men who were smarter than me, who were more educated, who had more drive, and I was like, yeah, we're all just the same thing. It's just our culture, our upbringing. That is the main reason for the differences in our behavior. Nature lost out to nurture in my worldview. And I thought this was a great thing about paleoanthropology, was that it put to rest the racism claims of different groups who said this group's inferior or that group's inferior. I could say it's all bullshit, man. We're all the same. One of the amazing things about paleoanthropology that I love so much is that it's always changing. Human history could be rewritten by lunch today based on a discovery, made last week or a few years ago or 100 years ago in some cases. It just wasn't looked at before now. And so, my understanding of human origins has likewise changed. I'm going to put up a graphic here. Another couple of caveats I need to get into. I'm using ChatGPT for the illustrations. My eyes are not good right now. I need to get some more glasses, so I'm kind of squinting. If there are spelling errors, that's on me. Any errors, they're on me. I am not classically educated in this subject. I know a decent amount about paleoanthropology, and I would say a slightly above beginner's grasp of DNA. So please understand these are just my thoughts. So starting around 400,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, or their very close ancestors, began arriving on the scene in Africa. And yes, I'm still using the out of Africa hypothesis. It still has the most weight behind it. Maybe that'll be proven wrong too in the future. But if you're going to say it's been proven wrong now, no, it hasn't. Anyhow, in Africa, as that graphic showed, there were at least, and I'm sure there were more, 6 different archaic human species. And Homo sapiens was one of them. Homo naledi, I believe that's how you pronounce it, was another. And there were others. Well, it's important to note we do not have DNA evidence that Homo naledi and Homo sapiens interbred, but they had to have, man. And I'm going to file that under the same thing as Homo sapiens and Neanderthal or Denisovan interbreeding. So undoubtedly there was archaic human and modern human interbreeding. And I use modern human in quotes, like the skulls that we found out of Morocco, some of the oldest Homo sapiens, but they had very flat and like horizontal heads compared to our bulbous vertical ones. So there was obviously some physical differences. And these groups would have been in contact with each other sometimes, and other times not. The environment would have closed up around them during periods of heavy ice or heavy heat, and transportation and meeting the different groups would have been possible sometimes and not possible others. So that's the first part of my hypothesis, okay, is that different groups of Homo sapiens developed in different parts of Africa, isolated from each other, and therefore they were often closed genetic systems, I guess you could say. And therefore they did not have the same genes as everybody else on the continent. One group might have a certain set of genes and another different. And what I mean by genes, I'm not talking about level of melanin, okay? I am talking about genes that affect behavior. Okay, there is a gene all humans possess called COMT, and I'll be putting up a graphic on that as well. What this gene does is there's two variations, okay, two alleles, I believe they're pronounced. Again, I never went to class for this. This is all stuff that I've read, and so I probably sound like a real dummy sometimes pronouncing these things. But anyhow, the COMT gene, you can get, this is an oversimplification, but you can get a warrior allele predisposition or a warrior. And I would encourage you to look this up on your own. So, the COMT allele is typically called the warrior versus warrior. And so, these genes affect behavior. The example I was shown was, if there's a immediate threat, a lion wandering into the campground or the village, the people who've inherited the warrior allele are more likely to immediately confront that threat, as opposed to the people who inherited the warrior variant. Those people, their job in the village wasn't so much immediate threats, but long-term planning. And it's easy to see how having a village comprised of both these would be beneficial. But in some environments, naturally, the warrior is going to benefit his society more than the warrior, and others, the warrior will benefit the society more than the warrior. And so, according to evolution, those variants would be enhanced in certain populations over long stretches of isolation from other groups. Okay, so maybe you can see where I'm going with this. You've got a group A in Africa. They've got a lot of lions, they're surrounded by lions. And so they have the warrior gene is dominant because that's what they need to survive. And in other areas, there are less lions. So the warrior, is the dominant one, setting up society, working on tools, improving things, that sort of thing. So, and then you combine that with geographical isolation over long periods, and those genes can evolve even further into variants outside what they originally were. So in other words, the warrior gene, who is on the prowl for lions, well, those genes make him hyper vigilant to any sort of threat, which probably is a good thing in ancient times, but can cause problems in modern society, because interpreting everything as a threat makes you a lot of enemies. So I hypothesize that some blacks received a hyped up version of that gene or some other gene that dictates behavior, and it comes to the forefront through random genetics. So you have one area of town that is black. Well, if that person inherited, in that area of town inherited the warrior gene, then he's probably a good tax-paying citizen. He's trying to build a life for himself. And if they got the warrior gene, they're not very good at planning. Their role in history is kind of fallen by the wayside in terms of usefulness. But they still have those hyper-vigilant actions. And you combine that with a culture that not only provides everything for them, food, medical, housing, education, which gives a sense of entitlement. But then you have the same culture telling them that they are victims and oppressed. And honestly, I don't think to the ghetto blacks it matters that it's, white person or Asian or what have you. They just need someone to blame, because on some level they realize that it's not that they won't fit into society, it's that they can't. Their genetics are outdated and will no longer, there's no longer lions wandering into town. So, but that violence has to go somewhere, and it has been directed at Caucasians for the most part. Again, this is not all blacks, it's not even the majority of blacks, but I am talking about the ghetto blacks. And this, let's call it the ghetto gene, the hyperviolence gene, whatever. I believe that it evolved over in Africa. I believe it's still passed around in a lot of Africa, and that it has made its way to the United States, to Europe, to other countries, other civilized countries. And that's why you see these people not only failing to adapt and failing to thrive, but becoming problems for the rest of the population that does not have that particular genetic inheritance. Now, perhaps that's all wrong. I am not the be-all, end-all font of wisdom. But there's something going on. You know? It's not just cultural. You can get, a black person in the ghetto, and they will rise out of it. They'll go on to become, a doctor or, a plumber or, a bricklayer, something middle class, something higher. It's not all of them. But then the guy who was born next door, the different set of genes, he's in prison by 18 for killing somebody because somebody disrespected him or whatever. Silly crap. And this makes sense to me. With my intellectual and educational limitations, this makes sense to me. Perhaps I'm incorrect. I would love to hear other theories instead of just the slings and arrows of the internet, but honestly, I don't care. I've seen what you people value. You celebrate people like Carmelo Anthony stabbing somebody in the heart, and I think that either you are culturally inferior or you have genetics that do not work in our society, and probably a combination of both. But it's not just cultural. It can't be. There's too much evidence of genes affecting behavior and no. So what can be done? Well, I know we're doing a lot of work with altering DNA and genetics. I think it would be worth pursuing that particular gene, or maybe discovering a different gene that's responsible for the violence and editing it out of future populations. Yes, that's eugenics. I get that. But what's the alternative? The alternative is living with these savages who have no respect for life, no respect for property, no respect for others or themselves, who are in a permanent state of near animalism, and who continue to hold back not just the other blacks, the normal blacks in our nation, but everybody. You just turn on the news, man, and you can see what these ghetto blacks are reaping upon society. They have to be dealt with. And personally, I think altering genetics, altering 1 or 2 genes or whatever to make the next generation more successful in our society beats the alternative, because the alternative is much more punitive. And I'm not just talking prison here. I don't want to constantly be paying taxes for an increasing number of violent ghetto savages. Unless we reduce their numbers one way or another, we will never reach our full potential as a nation or society. So those are my thoughts. I apologize for not being more of an eloquent speaker. Like I said, my mouth is not graceful. I realize I speak in a odd cadence. That's because my brain never shuts off, man. And I'm always thinking, and I'm trying to speak while I'm thinking and trying to think of the best words to use. And, you know, I'm just a dude, man. I'm not a public speaker, not a scholar, just a guy who is really, really fatigued, to use modern parlance. And I'm really sick of them. And I know everybody is. Whites, normal, blacks, Asians, we cannot stand their ghetto asses. And something has to be done. This is my attempt to understand the problem so that we can move forward on a solution. Because unless you understand the problem, you can't fix it. So, thank you for watching this. I would love to hear your thoughts. Unless you're just going to call me a cracker racist, in which case, you know, I mean, go hang out on the street corner and smoke a cool. Shit, man. Cool cigarettes. My dad loves cool cigarettes. I would not mind one myself right now, but I'm not going to interact with humanity in order to get cigarettes. Y'all have a wonderful day, and thank you for your time.